are talking Bull Shark 3, directed and written by Brett Bentman and stars Thom, Hallum and Billy Blair. Obviously the third in this series. Now this is a 2024 movie, but part 2 was also a 2024 movie, so I suspect they were filmed back to back. The original came out in 2022, and for the large part wasn't well liked by most reviews that I saw. I actually didn't mind it, but I wasn't so keen on the second one. So, in case you were unawares, a bull shark is a shark that can survive in fresh water as well as salt water. So that gives it a unique threat in some ways. So in this third movie, there is multiple bull sharks now in this lake, and that was established at the end of the second movie. So it is once again up to Thom Hallum's character, who is an ex-game warden, to rally a small group of officials, the mayor, the kind of town sheriff, for example, and try and stop this menace. Is the long and short of it. Well, before they kind of really ruin the town's reputation and basically eat everyone that goes near this lake. So what will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So this is a very low budget movie. If you haven't seen the other two movies, this is a extremely low budget movie, and it does show. Let's talk about what I think works in this movie's favour. Now, this movie in some ways plays a lot like the second film, in the fact that we have one shark attack at the beginning, and we really don't have any more shark attacks until we try and deal with the threat at the end. So what we do have is the majority of the runtime taken up with conversations in rooms. Now, this was my main critique with the second film, and it is still true of this film. However, I enjoyed the conversations a little more this time round. Now, I suspect that most people will not give this movie a favourable review, but I do think it has some things in its favour. I think they have, at least this time, evolved the character played by Thom Hallum. You know, he's now at this point on his road to sobriety. He was a heavy drinker in the last two movies. We also have a less sort of combative atmosphere between the human characters, and that's kind of the one thing I think that I liked about the kind of the conversation, shall we say, in this movie, is that there's more of a sense of camaraderie where you don't have time wasted with human bad guys, as many low budget kind of movies tend to do. If they're creature features, let's waste time having like human antagonists as well, because they are cheaper. It's at this time we get the people who were somewhat antagonistic to one another actually kind of pull together and kind of work as a team. So it has a sense of camaraderie. You have a sense of people looking to put their differences aside for the greater good. So you have a positive sort of feeling from our sort of characters. People are working together. Again, this is going to sound like a relatively minor thing, but it's something I like when I watch a film. If I'm watching a film where someone works in a particular profession, I like to see them work in a professional manner. So we have this group of people, the mayor, a couple of game wardens. We have like the chief of police, and we have this woman who has some experience with marine biology. And they are trying to kind of figure out a way to stop these sharks without destroying the town and without kind of panicking the people. And I don't know, for me it was just quite good to see these characters kind of like, okay, well we could do this, but we can't do that because of that, and then they'll set this plan, but then something happens where they can't do that, so they've got to kind of adjust their plans. And it might sound like a minor thing, but it just seemed to me like, if you were in a situation like this, a lot of it is probably going to be planning what you are going to do. And as much as that doesn't sound like it's an interesting movie, it probably is more realistic. There's probably more time spent on bureaucracy rather than actually doing the kind of the tasks, if that makes sense. So it gave this movie a sense of, at least in that respect, of that people were acting like professionals to a degree, and therefore, even though I wouldn't say this movie is realistic, at least those character moments I felt were a little bit more believable, and you kind of bought into them a bit more. These are people just trying to kind of figure out sort of problems, and I found it interesting. I won't lie, I kind of liked it, and I gotta say I didn't think the acting, particularly from Thom Hallum, was all that bad. I actually thought his character, again, he seems to have kind of like moved his character forward a little bit. He's no longer the kind of the quick to anger drunk guy. He's sort of getting over it, and he's willing to kind of work with, you know, his compatriots, and I thought the acting was fairly solid. The movie also, like the second one, has a comedic edge to it that at times threatens to be a little bit goofy, but I do think there are some kind of funny moments in it, and some of the kind of just the quips and the kind of the quicks of the back and forth between the sort of characters, I genuinely did find quite amusing. And again, they're nothing over the top. These aren't like comedy set pieces, but it's the sort of kind of funny interactions that you'll get with people. Like, for example, they split up into teams, and there's two on a boat, and we have a couple. The kind of assistant game warden and the chief of police, and the assistant game warden, Billy Blair's character, wants to go for, well, he wants to drop a stink pickle, let me just say that. And like, he's like, well, why? The other guy's like, why didn't you go like before? And it's just like, I kind of need to go now. And it's just like, it's like a funny conversation, because it's something you can imagine happening in a workplace and things like that. So I kind of quite liked it. And I found that, you know, so just some kind of good character moments, really. And that's the strongest praise I really can give this movie, to be honest, because the shark attacks really aren't anything, and we'll come on to that. But yeah, I thought the character work here was a lot better. I thought the acting was, for this type of movie, relatively kind of solid, and I like the sort of the positivity almost of these people kind of working together. When a lot of these type of movies where you have like the mayor and stuff, it's always like, oh, they just want to keep open for the tourists, like Jaws. So it has this like somewhat of a kind of a different feel to previous kind of like shark films, and even in this very series. There's a couple of shots in regards to sharks, and I do mean a couple, that look okay. To be honest, we don't see a hell of a lot of sharks on screen in this. It's clearly the biggest drain on resources, but there are one or two shots where I do think you know, it's achieved at least a reasonable kind of quality here and there. And you know, ultimately, I don't think it's a badly put together movie on a technical level. Things like sound design, cinematography, stuff like that, it's fine. It's, you know, it's a kind of like a relatively well put together on a clearly very low budget movie, so props for that. What doesn't work, and like I said, I think this movie will not be treated kindly by people who review it, because legitimately, as much as I kind of quite like some of the character work here, and that's a big thing for me, I feel most people will say there's barely any sharks in this shark movie, and that is true. We have one legitimate shark attack right at the beginning of the movie, and that is it. And this was one of the issues with the second movie, which is why I gave it a lower score, because you get one shark attack, really, and that's it. Even in the finale at the end, you never really feel the characters are genuinely threatened by these sharks. Yeah, so very little shark attacks, and when we do see them, outside of a couple of shots, I think the generally speaking, the CGI is, you know, not strong CGI, let me just kind of put it like that, which, you know, ultimately means, in a way, it's better that they didn't use lots of, you know, sharks on screen, because it kind of looks like video game sharks. Bad CGI sharks, that old chestnut. So yeah, the sharks aren't on screen a lot. We don't really, when we do see them, the majority of the time it's either a kind of a bad CGI shark or it's like a plastic fin. There's not really, when we do see the gore, there isn't a huge amount of it on screen again. There's one sort of gore shot when someone gets their arm bitten off in the beginning of the movie, but there's not a lot outside of that. These are, I think, movies made to go on like YouTube and stuff, so they're not particularly kind of gory or anything kind of like that. So yeah, not a lot of gore here. There are elements that, like I said, I could have quite liked some of the humour, but again, sometimes it ends up being characters seem a little bit too cartoonish. The Billy Blair character, again, I think pushes the boundary a little bit of having going from a character to a caricature. I kind of find it somewhat amusing, to be honest, but there is that to be said, and it really follows the same sort of, as I say, the setup of the second film. Obviously, but this is more than likely filmed at the same time or filmed directly after the second one, and the problem with that is obviously any critiques that might come from the second movie can't be addressed because you've already made the third one. So it really doesn't have, you know, the idea here being that there's more sharks in the water rather than the singular shark that we've had in the last two movies. Does it come into play a lot? Not really, to be honest. It's not really it doesn't really change the proceedings really all that much. So very much like this, the rest of this series, it's a low budget movie. I kind of quite like some of the character work, but if you're watching this for a shark movie, probably the first one is still the stronger film, but I do think it's better than the second one. So as such, I'm going to give this movie a 4 out of 10. Not a bad movie, I don't think, and I'm happy that it's got some work done with the characters here. But yeah, as a shark movie, it's a little disappointing, a little toothless. 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.